My name is Kotz. I'm the teaching pastor here. We are in the middle of a series called The Journey Begins. We are going through the first few chapters of Matthew, and throughout the year, we'll go through the rest of the book of Matthew. Last week, I showed you the screen of the QR code for the Q and R, question and response. And I told you guys, if there's anything that's unclear about the sermon, please let me know. And I'm just going to assume that no one asked me questions, that I did a good job. And I got no questions. So either that, thank you. Either that or you're like, no, when Kotz tries to answer questions, it just gets more confusing. So I don't know which one it is. Today's message could be just as confusing because we're going to go really deep. Whenever we talk about prophecy and how it's being fulfilled, it gets really complicated. And we're going to do that again today. We did that last week. We're going to do it again today. So again, scan this QR code, or you could go to the app and you could be ready to ask the questions, and I'll address them next week in the beginning of the sermon. So today we are starting Matthew chapter 2. So let's get started because we have a lot going on today. Matthew chapter 2. Again, we're still in the Christmas story thing, okay? Here we go. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, okay, that's key right there. He was born in Bethlehem, in Judea, that's the region, that's like the southern part of Israel. During the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, okay? You guys know this story so far? You guys familiar? If you've been to any Christmas service, you've probably heard of this before. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and it was during the time of King Herod. Okay, we'll talk about him later. And there's a group of people called the Magi. You guys heard of the word? Like, if you didn't grow up in church or you haven't read the Bible, you probably think it's like wise men. And that's because in older translations, they use the word wise men. Some people call them kings, right? There's a song called, what is it? We Three Kings. Yeah, We Three Kings. But if you read the Bible, it says Magi. So where did that come from? We'll talk about that too today, okay? And they came to Jerusalem. Now, this is weird, okay, because he was born in Bethlehem, but they went to Jerusalem, not the same city. And we'll talk about that too. There's a lot to talk about today. So when I started this, preparing for this sermon, I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, can you generate for me an image of the Magi going to Bethlehem, right? Because I want to see what ChatGPT thinks about this. And this is the image he gave me. Now, it's beautiful, right? Yeah, like there's three guys riding camels. By the way, if you read this story, there's no camels mentioned. We'll talk about that too. And I guess over here, that's the star, and that's the city, which it's interesting because it looks like Los Angeles when you're flying over at night. They don't have street lights, so it's not supposed to be that lit up, but close enough, right? AI is get there soon enough. Okay, the word Magi is a Persian word because, did you know Magi is actually plural? What's the singular form of Magi? Anybody? Magistrate. Anybody else? Magician. That's where the word magic comes from, by the way. The word is magus. M-A-G-U-S. I know. I didn't know that until this week also. I was this years old when I figured out that Magi is actually plural. Okay, let me get back to, okay. So the Magi, they come from the east, okay? And the east is where Babylon is. Now, if you don't know Bible history, Babylon was a group of people who came to Israel, conquered Israel, and took the kids out and brought them back, and basically they were oppressors. They oppressed the people, the main characters of the Bible, okay? So they're not good people, but that's not them. These guys are the descendants of those people, okay? And this is going to be important in a few minutes. Now, these people called the Magi, they study the stars. They look at the stars, and they have their own religion, and they're like, oh, this star must mean this, and that star must mean that. And they believe that the gods spoke to them through the alignments and the shining and the twinkles of the stars. So, what does that have to do with our story today? Well, next slide. Here's a map. This is Jerusalem. This is Bethlehem. Jesus is born where? Bethlehem. The star took them, if they're following the star, took them to Jerusalem, which is weird. Like, did the star get it wrong? Okay, next slide. So this is the rough journey that they took. They made it to here, okay? So there's this weird question when you're reading this and you are allowed to question the Bible. You're reading the Bible and you're like, wait, I don't get it. Why? Jesus was born here, but the star took him here. And why did they do that? Why did, like, is there something that maybe the star was like, I need to make a detour. There's something I forgot at Jerusalem. I need to pick it up before I go to, like, why, right? So the star leads these people, the Magi, to Jerusalem. And when they get to Jerusalem, they meet the king of the Jews. His name is Herod the Great. Herod the Great. Now, some background story on this guy. Herod the Great is the king of the Jews, but the problem is he's not a Jew. He is a Jew by title, by label, but he's not really a Jew, like by blood. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the book of Matthew, there's like a genealogy of the kings that lead to Jesus. He's not a part of that list. Okay, he's not a Jew. As a matter of fact, the reason why he's the king of the Jews is because about 150 years before this story takes place, there's a Jewish king who goes to what is today Jordan, goes to Jordan and takes over that land and force converts those people into Judaism. And a few generations later, we have King Herod. And this guy, he likes to build stuff, build buildings, right? So he basically made a lot of money. And through his money, he was able to make friends with a lot of other rich people. And he bought his way into power. And then eventually he was appointed king by the people who are occupying the land. So the people who were living there were like, Herod, he's not really our king. He's just a power-hungry guy. Meanwhile, Herod is like, I am the king, and I get to enjoy all the benefits of being king, okay? There's another thing he's known for. He's also known for being paranoid. He's always afraid that somebody's going to show up and take his throne, so he's always looking over his back. As a matter of fact, he ended up killing some of his own children because he was afraid that they were going to take over his throne. And not only that, on the day that he was going to die, he was afraid that the whole nation was going to celebrate the fact that he's not king anymore. So he made sure that the whole nation would mourn on the day he died by instructing his soldiers to go and kill a bunch of people in Israel the day he died, so the whole nation would be mourning on the day of his death. That's the kind of guy he is. Yeah, you really want to have him over for lunch, right? Like that's not the guy that you want living across the street from you. So he's always paranoid, and like I said, he built a lot of things. He has so many palaces, and one historian said that he had so many palaces that he built that he could spend the rest of his life living in one palace every month of his life, and he would not run out of palaces. He built so many things. Some of them are even there today, so you could go check it out if you are in that area. Okay, that's all you need to know about him. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. So, going back to the story, the Magi follow the star, and they go to find this newborn king, and they go to Jerusalem first. And this is what they ask. The Magi asked, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? Which, imagine if you're King Herod, you're like, excuse me? What do you mean? Like, I'm king, right? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So how was Herod going to respond to this? Well, when he heard this, he was deeply, next slide, he was deeply disturbed. And because he was disturbed, and because everybody in Israel knew that he was trigger happy, all of Jerusalem was also disturbed. So, what does he do? He's like, okay, we got to figure this out, right? Like, okay, what do you mean the real king is now born? Like, what are you talking about? So, this is what he does. King Herod, when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. He says, okay, well, I am the king of the Jews, and I have all these priests and all these scholars. I have all these Bible nerds at my disposal. Let's have a meeting. So he calls everybody in and says, okay, here's the Bible. Read through it. Tell me what you could learn about, like, these Magi, they just show up out of nowhere. And well, tell me, like, what do you know about them? Like, who is this new king that's supposed to be born? So they do their Bible study. They're reading, and they get to the book of Malachi, and they're like, we think we have an answer. And this is their answer. In Bethlehem, like we've read this passage, and we think this newborn baby king is in Bethlehem in Judea, for this is what the prophet has written. It's like we're reading the book of Malachi, and we came to chapter 5, and this is what we read, and this is what they quote. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler. So we think King Herod. We think this newborn king is in Bethlehem. Now, for those of you who are also Bible nerds, you'll notice that that's not the end of the quote. You see there's a ... right here? That's not the end of the quote. But remember, they're saying, we read the book of Malachi, here's what we read, and copy and paste, here it is. But then they add an extra line. I don't know if you know this. They add an extra line, and this is what the extra line is. Who will shepherd my people Israel? To which I think you guys are thinking like, well, that really didn't add much content. Like, I don't know why they added that. No. Okay, this is like, what do you call it? Like a slow burn? I don't know what you call it. It's like a mic drop moment, and I'll explain. The content of this right here is not the point. You see, they copied this part from the book of Malachi, right? Like, oh, we read the book of Malachi, and this is what it said. This part that they added is from the book of 2 Samuel chapter 5. And for those of you who are Bible nerds are like, no way, right? I know, right? You guys know? Okay, no, okay. Why did they attach this little line in here from 2 Samuel chapter 5? Do you guys know what happens in 2 Samuel chapter 5? Probably not, because I never preached on it. Okay, but there's a king called King Saul who's sitting on the throne. And God looks at that and says, you're not supposed to be king anymore. We have somebody else. His name is King David. So he employs one of his prophets to show up at the doorstep and says, King Saul, your time is over. Now it's time for King David to rule. So can you imagine, like, if you know exactly what's going on here? These scholars of Israel are basically telling King Herod, oh, we found the verse about this baby that's born, and also, not to mention that your time is over because, right? What they're doing by adding this line from 2 Samuel chapter 5 is they're basically making a statement. They're saying this, Herod, your time is over, right? Because the true king is here. That's what they're trying to imply here. This is how you meditate on Jewish literature, by the way. You try to find out anyways, okay. Now, I'm not sure if King Herod understood the burn that was happening right here, like the mic drop that was happening here, right? Like, I wonder if he was like, cool, Bethlehem, got it. Or was he like, oh no, he didn't. Like, I don't know which way he kind of responded to this. But whatever it is, this is how King Herod responds. He says this, then King Herod called the Magi secretly, and I wonder why it's secret, secretly, and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for this child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him, which we know that's not true. He's totally threatened by him, right? Like, oh, my time here is short. So if you find this baby, let me know so I could go worship him. But no, really, he wanted to. Right? Okay. Let's continue. And they, after they heard the king, they went on their way. The Magi went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was, which is Bethlehem. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Like, yay, we finally found it. So, map time. So, from Jerusalem, they make their way now to Bethlehem, because that's where the star led them. Okay, let's continue the story. Now, on arriving in Bethlehem to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and he's a child now. He's not a baby anymore, so it's been about 2 years now. And they bowed down and worshiped him. Now, the reason I highlighted bow down is because this is so important understanding the prophecy. You'll see it in a minute. I'm really excited about this. I hope you are too, but this is like Bible nerds' dream come true here. Okay. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with the gifts of, you guys know this? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Quiz. What's frankincense and what's myrrh? We know what gold is. They're both incenses. Incenses. Is incense one of those words that's plural already? Or do you have to add an S? Incenses sounds weird. Okay, so there's gold and incense. Two varieties of incense. Okay, so we're going to wrap up the story one more verse, and then we're going to ask some questions here. Next verse. Here we go. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So here's the map of what's going on. So they made it to Bethlehem, and instead of going back to Jerusalem to tell the king, they were like, later. They just went home. Okay. So if you're honest when you're reading through this story, you probably have some questions. And I want to share with you 2 questions that I came up with. Hopefully these are the questions that you guys had in your mind. The first one is this: what's the deal with the star, right? What is that about? I mean, and why, like, if it was like a star, then don't you think like everybody would be like, what is that star doing, right? And like it stopped at Jerusalem first before they made it to Bethlehem. Like, why did it have to stop there? And the second question is this: so what's with the gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Like, why is it important? Like, Matthew could have just written, hey, these guys showed up and just dropped off some gifts. Why did they have to say it was gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Okay, I'm about to get nerdy, if I haven't already, but I am now. Okay. Did you know that this story is actually a callback to a prophecy from Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah 60, if you want to jot it down, you can. You can read it for yourself later. But I'm just going to go over just a few verses and show the significance of what's happening in the Matthew story, okay? So, in Isaiah chapter 60, we have God speaking to the city of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is personified as like a person here, okay? So he's talking to Jerusalem. And this is how it goes. Arise, meaning wake up, Jerusalem, wake up. Shine, for your light has come. Like, what light? And the glory of the Lord rises upon you. The word glory in the Greek is the word doxa, which means radiance, light. So they're talking about a star. They're saying there's this light that has come over you. Now, more context than this story right here. There's this prophecy that there's this amazing king that shows up in Israel. And because of this king, God is so pleased with this king that he's going to show his pleasure to everybody by putting a light over the city. That's what he's saying right here. See, darkness covers the earth and thick darkness is over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you and his doxa, his light, appears over you. Nations will come to you, to your light. So like, because this light is so beautiful, there's going to be nations from other places that's going to come. And who? Kings. Kings to the brightness of your dawn. Now, like I said, in the Matthew story, there's no kings mentioned, right? But the reason why some scholars start to imagine kings when they think about this story is because of this prophecy. That's why kings, right? So here's a little, if you don't understand what's going on here, here's a little animation for you. This is Isaiah 60. This is Jerusalem right here. And the prophecy basically says this. One day, next slide, we have a king, question mark on his face. We don't know who this king is, but whoever this king is, God is going to be so pleased with this king, next slide, that one day God is going to show his glory over the city, this, right? And then, next slide, he's going to shine a light to the whole world. And because of that, we're going to have kings, next slide, that's going to come and visit. And you're like, what's the camel doing there, right? Well, the camel comes in the next part that I'm going to read to you. This is verse 5. The wealth of the seas will be brought to you. To you, the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camels will cover the land, your land. Young camels of Midian and Ephah. What does that mean? It just means like the most finest of camels, you know, because that's what we all want for Christmas is like the luxurious camels. That's the one I want, yeah. And all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense. And proclaiming the praise of the Lord. Do you see, like, if you're a nerd, you're like, your mind's blowing up right here, right? This is a fulfillment. The Matthew story is a fulfillment of this prophecy. And not only that, remember I said, like I highlighted the word bow down? Where does that come in? Look at this. A few verses down, verse 14. The children of your oppressors. Who used to oppress Israel? The Babylonians from the east, right? They will come bowing before you. Right? Okay. All who despise you will bow down at your feet and will call you the city of the Lord, Zion, which is now called Jerusalem, of the Holy One of Israel. Do you see, next slide, do you see when I asked ChatGPT to generate this image, why they included camels? I don't know if they were actually thinking about this, but you know, most Christmas cards look like this, right? Right? Do you see why Matthew had to tell us what the gifts were? Do you see why Matthew said when the Magi arrived in Jerusalem, there's not one mention of them bowing down, but when they show up in Bethlehem, they finally bow down, right? So in other words, the visitation of the Magi is the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 60. But you might be saying, well, Kotz, if you said that we're allowed to ask the Bible questions, then I have a question for you. That's probably what you're thinking. Because that prophecy that we just read together, isn't it clear that that prophecy is about Jerusalem and not Bethlehem? Okay. That was pretty aggressive, but okay. Let's look at the map. The prophecy was about Jerusalem, not about Bethlehem. So did the prophet get it wrong? Or is Matthew trying to squeeze in a prophecy that doesn't belong? Is he trying to pick and choose and then be like, yeah, come on, I'm just saying it works. Just turn a blind eye to the other parts and it all makes, is that what Matthew's doing? Because this clearly is not about Jerusalem, right? So there's a few things you need to know to make sure that you understand what Matthew's trying to do here. First thing is this. If you go to Jerusalem, you'll find a temple there, okay? And a temple is a place where heaven and earth overlapped. And in case this is new to you guys, let me kind of give you a quick lesson on that one. Next slide. Jerusalem was known as a place where heaven met earth. Humanity, we have our realm. We choose to do certain things with the land that we're in right now. Like we vote and we make decisions every day, how we treat our neighbors and stuff like that. And God has his realm. And he controls what happens in that realm. And at one point in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it overlapped. What he wanted was exactly what we wanted. But over time, we separated, right? But every once in a while, we find these little hot spots where God's will and our will overlap, and something amazing happens when that happens. The temple, inside the temple, was known as the hot spot of heaven on earth. So if you were sick and you went to the temple and you said, please, Lord, heal me, and God's like, well, my will is that you're supposed to be healed, then in that hot spot, it would happen, right? If you are cast out of society and you're like, I want to get back into society, and God would say, well, my will is that you're part of the society, that everybody comes together, right? It will happen because that's where you want to be, where heaven and earth overlapped. And they thought Jerusalem was that place, okay? Now, with that in mind, let's look at the Matthew chapter 2 version of the story. So we have this. Here it is. Okay? Now, this is what happened in Matthew chapter 2. First, the star arrives. Next slide. There it is. Okay? And then the shine, the radiance, the doxa, the glory of God. Boom. But then we find out that the king here is not the king that was prophesied in the Bible, right, in Isaiah chapter 60. But anyways, the star is there. So next slide, we have the king arrive, we have the camel, and after the camel arrives, we have the treasure. And then these guys are like, hold up, you are not him. You're not the king we're looking for, right? So next slide, they're like, we're going to take our camel, we're going to take our treasure, we're going to get out of here. And then the star is like, yeah, me too. Next slide. So the star is like, okay, we're out of here. This is not the king that we thought it was. And then the king arrives here in Bethlehem. The star arrives here in Bethlehem. And then the king and the camel and the treasure shows up and says, this is him. Okay, so this is what happened here. So Matthew is making 2 points here, very important points. Number one is this, that the true king is Jesus, right? They went to Jerusalem first to check out and see, well, who is this king? And they find out that's not him. And so they went to another place to find the true king. So Matthew's making the first point, which is Jesus is the true king that's been prophesied. The second thing he's saying is this, because why isn't it Jerusalem? Matthew is making a point here that Jerusalem, the prophecy was not about the actual location Jerusalem. The prophecy was about what Jerusalem stood for. If Jerusalem is a place where heaven and earth overlapped, right, then the true place where heaven and earth overlaps is where the star went, which is actually Jesus. The true heaven on earth is actually Jesus. Wherever he went, that's where the hotspot of heaven on earth is, right? So this is the point that he's making. Matthew is saying, I told you this story in this way because I want you to know that Jesus, not Herod, who gained his position at the throne through questionable means, he is not the king. The true king is this baby. His name is Jesus. And the second thing he says is, and if you feel like you have to go to Jerusalem, and by the time this happened, it was so political there that people weren't allowed into Jerusalem. He's like, if you want access to heaven on earth, you don't have to go to that location anymore. You just have to find Jesus because he is the true heaven on earth. Now, that's where the story ends, but there's another lesson that Matthew has embedded in this, and maybe I don't know if you picked up on it, and I just want to spend the rest of the sermon just talking about that. Did you guys notice that it was the foreigners? The foreigners were the ones who immediately recognized Jesus as the true king. These foreigners don't have the Bible. They don't have history with Jewish culture and Jewish scripture. They just saw that they looked through their own means and they said, hey, let's see a star. In our religion, we think the star points to the true king, so we're going to go over there, right? Like, it's weird because this is one of the main themes of the book of Matthew. That the people who you would least likely think would have a connection with God are the ones that God chooses to have a connection with God. The foreigners, they immediately recognize that Jesus, although he's a baby, is the true king. In the contrast, the one who calls himself the king of the Jews, the person who's lived his whole life in Israel, Herod, well, when he saw and heard about the king, he could only see a threat. He's here to dethrone me. My time here is short. Instead of seeing hope, which most people saw in the manger, he saw threat. He saw my comfortable way of life is coming to an end. He uses money not to help other people, but he uses money to gain power and status at the top seat of the nation. And then, I want you to imagine this whole story from Herod's perspective, okay? So imagine this. You have your own scholars, and you tell them to read the Bible and report back to you on what they find. And they say, hey, we just read Isaiah chapter 60. And what Isaiah 60 says is that one day there's going to be a king in Jerusalem, and God's going to be really happy with him. And so one day the star is going to come over him, and that's going to be a sign that all the riches from the world are going to come and bow down to you. He's like, awesome, I'm going to be king. So he becomes king, and he kills people along the way. He does some really questionable things, but he makes it to the top. And then one day the star arrives. It's like, yes! So imagine if you're King Herod, right? And you find out that the star came to try not to move. Imagine that you're the King Herod and you see the star come over your kingdom and you're like, yes, this is it. Like, I've been waiting for this my whole life. And the kings show up and they bring their gifts, right? And then here comes the camels, just like it's been prophesied. And the first thing they hear is, we're not here for you, we're here for somebody else. Where is the real king? Right? And then they go off to a small town. Bethlehem is a minor city. They go to Bethlehem and they see this tiny baby and they're like, we're here to give offerings of gifts to this baby. What do you think is going through the mind of King Herod, Herod the Great, who used his power, he used his might, he used his wealth to achieve the power that nobody ever dreamed of? The lesson that Matthew is trying to embed in this story is this, that real power does not lie with wealth or force. And you're going to see this theme throughout the book of Matthew, that blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, blessed are the weak. People who need help are the ones who are blessed, not the people who are trying to grab power as much as they can so they could become some political power. This is the lesson that Matthew is trying to teach us. And you're wondering, does this have any relevance to today? Maybe, I don't know. Real power from God's eyes is not about wealth. It is not about might. It is not about how many chariots, how many swords, and how many arrows you have. It is about love, compassion. And we're going to read about this more and more as we go deeper into the book of Matthew. A lot of us, I think we try to strive for power by trying to be the richest person on the block, have the nicest car, have the biggest house, have the most influence, be the most popular person in school. God would say that is not how he wants you to live. You're chasing after something that is temporary and sometimes, in most cases, destructive. So where does your power, where does your worth come from? Does your worth come from being close and recognizing who the true king is? Or does it come from force and wealth? Amen? All right.